Mass protests continued across the United States for the 8th consecutive night over the killing of an unarmed black man named George Floyd at the hands of a white police officer in Minneapolis. Now let's get you some of the latest updates on what is happening currently in the U.S. More than 40 U.S. cities have imposed curfews, including New York and Washington, D.C. But even with curfew hours looming, protesters refused to budge from the streets. The protests, which took a violent turn in the last few days, were largely peaceful. Even with the National Guard's presence in most states, governors are pushing back against the use of police force. In the capital, demonstrators were back on the streets of Washington, D.C., violating the curfew to continue protesting. After yesterday's violent clashes, a black chain link fence has been put up overnight to block access to the White House. About 1,600 active duty troops have been moved to Washington, D.C. to assist civil authorities. National Guard troops were seen standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial with heavy military presence in the area. But protesters remained undeterred. With their hands clasped behind them, many of them were seen lying on a road close to the White House, calling for justice.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
Residents of New York City staged a peaceful protest outside Mayor Bill de Blasio's residence an hour before the city enforced curfew. For the first time since World War II, New York prolonged its first curfew for the full week. Nurses and healthcare workers in, police and National Guard troops on the scene. In Portland, protesters were seen lying on the streets of the city with their hands behind their backs. In Seattle, protesters were struck by tear gas as demonstrations turned violent. On the other hand, in Houston, the family of George Floyd joined the protesters in a rally. Police brutality is what protesters are condemning in the various protests across the United States. While some protests themselves have seen excessive use of force by the police officers, many of them have come ahead in support of the demonstrations. In Denver, Police Chief Paul Pazin linked arms with the protesters, marching with them through the city.
President Trump was signing an executive order.
This is something that they were monitoring very closely.
18 months away, potentially.
It may have cost thousands of lives.
And the government to take strong action when it came.
Lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! No peace! No justice! No peace! To the people! George Floyd!
Mr. Johnson's at heart quite